Have you ever looked at a forest that's full of trees and giant plants and giant animals and even small bugs and everything? All these different organisms living and breathing in one place. Have you ever looked at that and wondered how exactly that came to be? Right? Because we know at the beginning of Earth, everything was just a flat, bare rock. But now we see gorgeous forests and rainforests and underwater oceans and all kinds of things in there. And how exactly did those come to be? Well, ecological succession is a study of how organisms and communities actually form from bare rock to form giant communities. And that's our topic for today. So let's look at this ecosystem right here. We see lots of greenery, and we assume that there are lots of animals and plants and bugs and everything living there very happily. However, it doesn't always look like this, right? Because sometimes there's these things called natural disasters, natural disturbances that actually can wipe out entire ecosystems. So this is what that same area looks like after a wildfire has occurred. Look at how everything just seems to be dead and dying and gone, right? All the animals you would assume are gone, and this ecosystem is no longer thriving and happy and pretty and all of those things. So, will the ecosystem always stay like this? No. The ecosystem will not always stay like this. It's going to eventually rebuild into something thriving and beautiful and gorgeous. Now, that doesn't happen overnight, it happens over years, and it takes a lot of certain steps to get to this thriving community again. Okay? And this thriving community, the process of going from that barren, right, this destroyed community to a thriving community again, that series of predictable steps is called succession. Okay? So again, succession is that set of predictable steps to go from a barren ecosystem to a thriving ecosystem. Because ecosystems rarely stay the same forever. That's just a fact, right? That's just a fact. Ecosystems rarely stay the same forever. There are natural disasters, there are certain disturbances that can destroy an ecosystem, and it's not going to ever stay the same. It's never going to stay broken, right? There's always going to be changes, new growth, and new life that happens. So let's look at some things that can actually cause change. Look at this image right here. Right? You see that's a wildfire. So that ecosystem of trees was once thriving, probably home to lots of birds and insects and squirrels and all kinds of things. But now that it's on fire, it's being destroyed. Look at this. This right here is after a hurricane has ripped through a border town. Okay? So there's lots of environmental disturbances that can cause an ecosystem to change, to be destroyed or ruined. Right? So you have wildfires, hurricanes, earthquakes, and volcanoes, but there's also grass being mowed. Grass being mowed actually destroys grass, right? So that's an environmental disturbance to grass. Once a disturbance occurs, the ecosystem will naturally begin to repair itself. So like I said, it's never going to stay just barren and destroyed, right? It's eventually going to fix itself. It's going to repair itself. That process of repairing an ecosystem is what is known as succession, right? That's the growth of an ecosystem. So succession is the order in which new species appear in an ecosystem over an extended period of time following a disturbance. So let's look at the process of succession through some pictures, through a little cartoon. So first, there's this thing called an established climax community. A climax community is going to be a balanced ecosystem that is full of life. A balanced ecosystem that is full of life. It looks pretty, there's lots of animals, everyone is good, everyone has resources. That is a climax community. Then some sort of disturbance destroys the community. So this disturbance could be a wildfire, an earthquake, a flood, a mowed lawn, any of those things. Those can be a disturbance that destroys the community. Once a community is destroyed, of course, organisms are either going to die in the disturbance, in the fire, in the earthquake, in the whatever, or they may run away. Right, so the ecosystem looks very boring and dry and just lame, okay? Then there's this thing called fast-growing lichens, fast-growing mosses. They're going to grow back first, right? They're going to grow back first. These are what are known as pioneer species. So think about what a pioneer is. If someone is a pioneer in the field, they are the first person to do that thing. Or like in SpongeBob, when they were talking about pioneers ride these babies for miles, talking about the rocks, right? Pioneers are those first organisms, those first things to grow, okay? So lichens and mosses, you need to know those words. Lichens and mosses, they're going to grow back first. Those are the pioneer species. Grass can also be a pioneer species, but it doesn't break down rock. Okay? After lichens and mosses grow back and start to form soil, then grasses can start to grow, then small bushes can start to grow, and then small trees, and then big trees. Once all of those plant life is there, then we have animals are able to return, insects and bugs are able to return, and once again, we begin to have that climax community again. Okay, so after the pioneer species do their job here, then bigger plants can grow and animals will be attracted and everything will turn back into a climax community. Okay, so again, that process of succession starts with an established climax community, right? Some sort of thriving community. Then there's some sort of natural disaster, some sort of disturbance destroys the community. After that disturbance destroys the community, then lichens and mosses are going to grow back. After lichens and mosses grow, then we're able to start having small trees, then big trees and animals and all of that. Okay, so it's a very sequential process. It has to happen step by step by step. This also does not happen overnight. This happens over years, okay? Now, this process of succession has two types. There's two different types of succession. The first one is called primary succession. Primary succession occurs when the disturbance left only bare rock. Okay, so look right here. This is a meteor site. So a meteor hit the earth and it left only bare rock. There's no soil, there's no trees, there's nothing left there but rock. This also can, a volcanic eruption can also leave bare rock, right? A volcano erupts, it cools, that leaves only rock. Okay, then that ecosystem is going to undergo primary succession. It's going to break down that rock into soil. Then that soil is going to be colonized by lichens and mosses. Then lichens and mosses are going to give way to grasses. After grasses, we have small trees. After small trees, then we have big trees. Okay? So that is going to take a long time. To go from rock to trees is going to take a long time. Then we have what is called the pioneer species. Again, is always the first to grow on bare rock. That's primary succession. Look at this cartoon right here. There's a rock and it has a lichen on it. It says, I'm really liking you. Okay? Pioneer species, lichen and moss. Then there's this thing called secondary succession, right? The disturbance left some soil still intact. So this could be after a wildfire, an earthquake, a mudslide, right? There's still soil there. It's not just rock. So the soil gets to give way to grasses, then grasses give way to small trees, and small trees give way to big trees, okay? And that takes way less time than primary succession. So a way to remember this is by secondary leaves some soil. Notice that they're all S's, right? So secondary succession, you know there's going to be some soil. So let's compare and contrast. Okay, so primary and secondary succession, the two types, right? Primary means that there was only bare rock. So this is typically a volcano or a meteor or something like that. This requires a long time to break down rock and then start growing. That takes a long time. Versus secondary succession, secondary some soil, that requires less time to fully restore balance of the ecosystem, okay? Because it already has soil. So it's not breaking down any rock, it just has soil, it's just gonna regrow. So why does succession exist? Why does succession exist? So look at this ecosystem right here. Do you think this ecosystem would undergo succession? Would it need to be repaired? Yes, it's going to need to be repaired. This oil, this chemical is not supposed to be in the water. It's not supposed to be covering these organisms. So this ecosystem, these plants and things are probably going to die. And once they die, they're going to need to be rebuilt. So ecosystems undergo succession to be repaired. How about this ecosystem right here? What about this one? Would you say that this ecosystem looks like it needs to be repaired, undergo succession? No, probably not. This looks like a climax community, right? There's lots of plants, there's lots of animals, everything looks very clean and healthy and happy. So again, I ask you, why does secession exist? What's the purpose of succession? Secession exists to repair ecosystems after a disaster. That's one thing about life is that disasters are going to happen. Disasters are going to happen. They're natural. Okay? So, what would happen if ecosystems couldn't repair themselves through succession? So, what would happen if this ecosystem could never get repaired? Okay, I want you to think about that. Now we're going to talk about diversity as it relates to secession. So, look at these two pictures right here. Which of these would you say is diverse? How about these two pictures? Which of these would you say is diverse? Exactly. So we know that diversity, okay, so we know that diversity, oh, so diversity between these two, this is going to be more diverse. There's more differences, there's more variety. Between these two, between the lichens and this climax community, this is going to be more diverse. It's going to have more variety, right? So the more animals, the more different plants, the more different insects that you have, the more diverse an ecosystem is. So secession at the very beginning looks like this, right? There's very little plant life, there's very little animal life, if any, right? And towards the end of secession, we're going to have lots of plants, lots of animals, and lots of insects. So that's going to have more diversity. So ecosystems get blank diverse through secession. Would you say ecosystems get more diverse through secession or less diverse through secession? Right? You would say ecosystems get more diverse through secession. So secession increases biodiversity, right? Because at the very beginning of secession, right after the disturbance has occurred, there is almost no life. Then we slowly start to get some life. We start to get some grasses and some small weeds. Then we start to get small trees and bushes. Then we start to get big trees and bushes. Then we get even bigger trees and bushes, right? So over time, we're getting more and more organisms in the environment. Okay, so that is all for secession. Okay, so remember, secession is that rebuilding of an ecosystem after a disaster of some sort. We have two types of secession. We have primary and we have secondary.